Let me just quickly introduce our speaker for today. I don't think she needs much of an introduction. Thank you, Prof. Bekker, for joining us today and giving this talk to us. Just for context, for those who don't know Prof. Bekker so well, so she's the director of the Desmond Tutu HIV Center at the University of Cape Town and the CEO of the Desmond Tutu Health Foundation. She's an A1 South African NRF-rated physician scientist and ranked #1 female scientist in South Africa. Her research interests include programmatic and action research around antiretroviral rollout and TB integration, prevention of HIV in women, youth, and men who have sex with men. And with that, I'll hand over to you, Prof. Bekker.
Thanks so much, Nadine, and hi, everyone. Real pleasure to be doing this today. And I'm going to dash through a bunch of slides and then hopefully have enough time to have a discussion around the points. I'm really going to hone in on the new PrEP technologies in particular, and then talk about access, which I think is on everybody's mind. Okay, so the first 30 years of the HIV response were really more about treatment. It was a time of emergency. The most important thing to do was to save people's lives. So it was about getting treatment to people and really not much focus on prevention for those early years. As you know, we were very dependent on the sort of ABC approach, a huge emphasis around condoms. And condoms have been around for a really long time, but they came into their own during the HIV epidemic, really as the first of our multi-purpose technologies. So protecting people against STIs, including HIV, and of course, unintended pregnancy, and really was the cornerstone of our prevention options. We do know it hasn't been quite as easy to get hold of lubricant for people, and certainly female condoms have not been as prevalent as male condoms. And as you can see, the global condom market continues to grow. But we know that prevention goes beyond just the biomedical. And I think in our Desmond Tutu organization, we've really learned, although we have a huge focus on biomedical technology, we've learned that it does not stand alone without behavioral, social, and structural inputs. And this diagram has really evolved over many years since 2008, when Tom Coates and other authors first floated a sort of behavioral, social, structural, biomedical approach. And we've over the years come to realize that we have to be, basing this in a much more comprehensive and integrated kind of way. So I'll be having that context as I talk very specifically about biomedical prevention technology. And of course, as you know, perhaps the cost of not spending enough time thinking about primary prevention, we have not brought this epidemic under control. And in 2020, we still had 1.3 million new infections, threefold higher than UNAIDS had hoped for by 2020. And so without doubt, we have to keep primary prevention as a focal point. So I'm pleased to say we really do have an array of prevention modalities. I think of it as a train where a carriage can draw up for you and provide the prevention that is most important and most suited to you as an individual. And in fact, you may need more than one carriage to draw up in your setting. So today, what I am not going to talk about is all those other very important prevention interventions, just for the interests of time. But I am going to spend a lot of time on the question or on the topic of pre-exposure prophylaxis. So getting on with that, just to say, biomedical technology is something that has revolutionized more than one field, and a close sort of sister field, if you like, is that of reproductive health. And it is really with the onset of the estrogen pill, the discovery of the oral contraceptive in 1960, that we really started to see reproductive outcomes change, where women started to have control of their fertility. And, things changed quite dramatically around the world. moving on in the last 40, 50, 60 years, contraceptive methods have really evolved and differentiated. And we now know that being able to offer women choice in their prevention is very important. We have increased persistence, increased use of contraceptive methodologies, and reduced unintended pregnancy when women are offered choice. So hold on to that, because we'll be coming back to that theme in a moment. So as mentioned, I am going to focus on pre-exposure prophylaxis, and this is how the field sits today. We've got the shorter acting PrEP on the left-hand side in the form of FTDF and its cousins, and then on the right-hand side moving into longer acting PrEP with, of course, the dapivirine vaginal ring and cabotegravir injectable, and coming soon is the 6-monthly subcutaneous injectable, which is currently in trials, but I'll be coming back to each of these in more detail. So let's start with the first generation, which was with this tenofovir diphosphate and emtricitabine combined into a single pill as a daily option. It is short acting, as mentioned, so it needs to be taken daily. We know that it is highly effective in people who are exposed both anally and vaginally. And we have good effectiveness if people are using this for at least 4 out of 7 doses or more per week. And we now know this has been shown both for men and women. And as long as that exposure is covered by FTDF, we really do see very good rates of protection. There was some concern that vaginal exposure may need better adherence, but this seminal paper now published and shown again at CROI recently by Jeannie Marazzo, the new head of the Division of AIDS, did a meta-analysis of a number of studies around the world. You can see a large number of women, and she was able to show that if there was at least 4 tablets per week swallowed by women, we really had efficacy rates as good as 7 tablets a week, or almost as good as 7 tablets. So this, I think, is reassuring. It does sort of open the option of maybe on demand across the board, but for the moment, we only have evidence for men in this regard, and men who have sex with men. So people who are exposed predominantly either through penile mucosa or anal mucosa, this notion of on demand. So on demand being 2 tablets before the exposure, 1 tablet a day later, and 1 tablet a day after that. Some guidance is now very supportive of this. It isn't across the board, but we again had a very good talk from Janelle Stewart at CROI describing this 2-1-1 strategy, as you see, and really showing that there is evidence now to support this, particularly in men and men who have sex with men. The next, if you like, sort of immediate generational development was a cousin of tenofovir diphosphate. This is tenofovir alafenamide. It is very similar to TDF in that it is a nucleoside reverse transcriptase inhibitor, but it is a much smaller tablet with better PK and fewer side effects. So we see fewer renal effects, we see fewer bone effects, and so this Descovy, as it is known, FTAF, has been shown to be non-inferior to FTDF, but you might want to use it in older people or people with bone mineral deficiencies, because it is protective in that regard. Of course, the cost is still high because it's not off patent, and it has not yet been shown to be effective in women. So hold the space. There is a trial underway, but we don't yet have evidence for women, and on demand is currently under evaluation. So now we move to the second generation. These are the longer acting biomedical technologies, and the first of this is for use in women only, or people born with a vagina. And it is a dapivirine ring. So dapivirine is a non-nucleoside reverse transcriptase inhibitor. It is infused into this silicone ring, which sits high up in the fornix, in the vagina, and is preferably left there for a month, being changed every month. 2 studies in 2016 showed modest efficacy, but subsequently the open label showed that actually this was a little bit better than first thought, up to a 50% efficacy, and I will show you some modeling data which shows that this may in fact be as high as 60% for a per exposure event. So here is some of the new vaginal ring studies we're seeing. First of all, the DELIVER study, no safety concerns found in pregnant people. So we hope that guidance will be moving towards including pregnant women very soon. Another study showing it's safe for lactating women and their offspring. So hopefully also guidance will move there. And a very nice study called REACH study in adolescent and young women, showing that when young people are offered the choice of a dipivirine ring or oral PrEP, they can make the choice for themselves. And when they're able to make that choice, they have better outcomes. So here you can now, this is now published, you can go read about it. But when young people are given this opportunity for choice, we see better product adherence overall and better compliance to product overall. I think very encouraging that young women were able to make the choice in an effective way. So what else is happening in the ring? Well, first of all, I mentioned this a modeling study per sex act showing that up to 63% reduction in incidence per sex act, which is encouraging. But in terms of the R&D, we're moving beyond the 25 milligram monthly ring to 100 milligram 3-monthly ring. And this is also being investigated at the moment and eventually will replace the monthly DAPI ring and hopefully in this way bring the cost down. And I'm not going to talk about the dipivirine levonorgestrel ring, which is an MPT, is also under investigation at the moment. So here is the next sort of consecutive development in PrEP. This is injectable PrEP. It goes into the gluteal muscle as an intramuscular injection, a long-acting suspension of a strand transfer integrase inhibitor known as cabotegravir. This has a long half-life, so the dosing can go up to 8 weekly. 2 studies were led around the world now some time ago. Landowitz, as you can see, published in 2020. The woman study published in 2022. Both of these are now FDA, the cabotegravir long-acting is now approved by the FDA, and I'll go into that in a bit more detail in a moment. But just to say that this has been shown in cisgender men, transgender women, and other people who have sex with men. And that was 083, and we do now have irrefutable and remarkable evidence in women who have sex with men where we saw almost a 90% reduction in incidence compared to an active arm. So the active arm was oral FTDF. So probably adherence being the reason why the one was better than the other, although we did see efficacy in the FTDF arm as well. There was not a placebo control in this study. We'll come back to this in a moment, but just to say there are some concerns about the use of cabotegravir long-acting simply because of this very long tail. So it is an 8-monthly injectable, but we know that if you don't have, once you're in the steady state, if you stop having the injection, the tail continues for quite a long time. And it has been shown that people can, if they're given the injection before they have seroconverted, so if you like during the acute infection window, they may in fact become infected under the mask of the cabotegravir. And this can lead to non-disclosure, if you like, of infection because these people may not seroconvert. And so this came out particularly in the 083 cohort. And of course, there is concern that you may develop breakthrough infection and resistance if you stop your CAB and you have diminishing drug levels of cabotegravir over time. But we can discuss this more in a moment. But just to say, this new concept of the Levi syndrome has come to be. There are a few other concerns about testing in this setting. As I've mentioned, you really do want to be sure that people do not have acute infection when you give them the Cabolet injection because of this very long PK. And what we find is that we are seeing some false positives as well as some false negatives. And again, we can come back to that in the discussion time. Will people choose Cabolet? Well, in the open label that followed on the active randomized phase of both 083 and 084, we saw overwhelmingly that people wanted to stay on the injectable. Now, of course, these people chose to go into an injectable PrEP study, so maybe this was a self-fulfilling prophecy, but you can see when they were given the choice to go back onto oral PrEP or stay on the CAB, they really, in this woman's study, there was overwhelming wanting to stay on the injectable. And even amongst pregnant people, and there have been now quite a few pregnancies in the open label phase of CAB, of HPT and 084, the women's study. But even here, women have chosen to stay on the CAB, the long-acting CAB, even though there really is only just beginning to be some increasing safety data around the use of CAB. What else is happening with CAB? Well, this is what we saw at CROI, that there's now the ultra long-acting CAB. The subcutaneous double dose has been stopped for reasons of skin reactions. And so the one that is being going into late stage development is the intramuscular 4-monthly injectable, and that will be moving forward. So we may see the 2-monthly replaced by a 4-monthly injection in the future. I do want to just digress for a moment to talk about this concept of multi-purpose technologies. Very exciting that there is work being done to understand, can we combine protection against STIs, HIV, and or contraception, which we know will be very exciting to women. This is just to direct you towards a nice website around the MPTs and to show you that most of the work is happening around the vaginal ring combining hormonal contraception or STI treatment. And you can see that there's a variety of things coming along. The first of these are currently in a trial. This is combining the oral PrEP and oral contraceptive into a single pill. And this study is currently underway. Viatris is leading it, and they plan to file for regulatory approval early, depending on the results of this. Just give you a sense of what's coming in the future. There are all sorts of things such as dissolving microneedles, implants, and a variety of other things. And just to give you a sense of that, there is now an exciting network called Matrix, which is looking at these products, these exciting other products, many of them in their phase 1s or even preclinical, a variety of vaginal films, dissolving pellets, so ultra short acting all the way through to very long acting. And here you see the dual purpose rings. I'm not going to show you those details, but just to say this is all on websites and you can go and look. Perhaps the most exciting, this one ring, the idea being that you can pop these pills out and replace with a variety of either hormonal or STI pills or PrEP pills in the future, depending on what you need and what is best for you. So very exciting, innovation in the pipeline. I wouldn't give a talk like this without, giving a nod to non-ARV based PrEP, and this is in the form of broadly neutralizing antibodies. Many of us took part in 2 studies, again, that happened around the world, one called AMP1, the other one AMP2, in a variety of diverse populations to show whether, or to test whether, a single monoclonal antibody, in this case VRC01, if infused, could prevent HIV infection. So these were infused, again, in an 8-weekly infusion over a period of time to say, can we prevent HIV? And this proof of concept was shown to work, but very important that the virus that was infecting needed to be sensitive to VRC01. In other words, the antibody needed to be able to cover the infecting virus. So that would fall into the sensitive or moderately sensitive group. And you can see when sensitive or moderately sensitive, then in fact we got good protection. It was the resistant viruses that allowed breakthrough infection. So the plan now is to create combination monoclonals for PrEP, and there are 2 tracks underway. One is to find an infant combo monoclonal. The other is to find an adult combo monoclonal, and these studies are currently being planned. Hopefully the infant will lead ahead of the adult, and these are probably going to happen in 2026 or so. What else is coming soon? Well, of course, lenacapavir, the HIV-1 capsid inhibitor. This has an incredibly long half-life. It's already been approved for treatment as salvage treatment for highly experienced individuals as treatment. But it really lends itself to prevention because it's a 6-monthly injectable. It's given subcutaneously. It has a high resistance barrier. And of course can be given as a single agent on its own. So very exciting. This is currently being tested in 2 studies, 2 big studies around the world, one amongst about 5,000 women fully enrolled in Uganda and South Africa, and the other one in a variety of cisgender men, transgender women, transgender men, and gender non-binary individuals around the world. Both studies fully enrolled. Both studies also very interesting design. So they are looking at an active comparator arm in the form of oral FTDF, but the primary comparator is background incidence. So there is an effort to discover incidence using recency testing to come up with an HIV counterfactual, which will be the primary endpoint analysis. And as you can see in the women's study, there is a second arm of FTAF, and there we're looking at non-inferiority between FTAF and FTDF in order to show the effectiveness of FTAF amongst women. We hope we'll hear about these studies as early as Q1 2025. So there are 2 other studies also happening in partnership with HPTN, women at risk of HIV in the USA, and people who use and inject drugs. So we really will have extraordinary data around this particular agent almost concurrently in a wide variety of people. Pregnant people may remain in the study, in the women's study, so we will have data on pregnancy, and we have gone as young as under 18, as young as 16, so we will also have some safety data in young women. Coming hot on its heels is, you will remember we started Empower some months ago. That study, unfortunately, of islatravir was stopped due to safety issues. Its cousin, MK8527, has now been taken off the shelf. It is also a nucleoside reverse transcriptase translocation inhibitor with a very long half-life, excellent PK, novel mechanism. And so it has been it works slightly differently to islatravir. So we don't expect the lymphocytes safety issues. And this is now being developed in place of islatravir for PrEP as a monthly pill. Very small pill, 12 have to be taken in a year. and very exciting that this is now in phase 2, and hopefully the phase 3 will be starting very soon. So this is what the updated pipeline looks like. As you see, vaginal ring and long-acting CAB is very much with us. Purpose is coming. The monthly pill is coming. And of course, FTAF, hopefully we'll also get that readout for both women, and we know that it works for men. We do know that it's not just what you give, but it's how you give it. So a quick word in terms of how we give out these biomedical strategies. And I just want to draw your attention to the World Health Organization's when, where, who, what approach to differentiated PrEP delivery. There is much on their website about this, but it really is about demedicalizing, differentiating, simplifying, and integrating PrEP within a broader package that takes PrEP to where people are in their communities. And a shout out to the DTHF team that is right in the middle of doing this very large implementation study called Fast PrEP. Think of fast food. This is Fast PrEP, where we really do offer PrEP everywhere. You can pick it up in your hub, which is either a mobile clinic or a facility that has been really geared up to give out PrEP, together with some peer navigation, and your follow-up maintenance doses you can pick up in mobile clinics, local clinics, schools. You can have it couriered to you. You can pick it up in a youth club, or you can pick it up at a quick depot, which may be at a hairdressing salon. There are a bunch of other things that are offered at the same time: contraception, STI screening and treatment, art if you happen to test positive, and mental health support. And we really are targeting a very broad group of people aged 15 to 29 and their male partners. So you can see LGBTQI are there, pregnant and breastfeeding people are there, and we're hoping to roll out to 25,000 PrEP users within a 3-year span. Linked to this and nested within this now is very exciting, a smaller study, which we've had to have approved by SAPRA in a 3B, called Prepared to Choose. And here we are able to offer a small amount of cabotegravir long-acting to 900 participants who choose the injectable agent, 300 participants who choose the vaginal ring, and 600 participants who prefer to go with oral PrEP. And the readout we're saying here is, if people are able to choose, do we see better persistence at 6 and 18 months than what we would see with oral PrEP alone? And so this study has commenced and is underway, and is very exciting. We're learning a lot. And this brings us very much to this notion of differentiated service delivery. Obviously, even within the choice of your PrEP modality, there is a where, who, when, what that may lend itself either to one kind of modality versus another. For example, you may want to have your PrEP couriered to you, in which case you cannot get injectable PrEP. So this is where there may be trade-offs in which PrEP modality you choose, depending on what service delivery outlet you want to use. So just to give you a sense of how complex prevention is becoming as we become more person-centered and client-centered in our approach. And again, here, sorry, this is the same study. So, and here really highlighting where we are in each of these modalities in terms of South Africa and their sort of characteristics. And we're feeding this into the choice process so people can really make an informed decision about what suits them the best. We do know that choice does bring its own complexities. It's going to take perhaps providers more time to work out exactly what is the best choice. Wrong choices could be made. It may lead to more anxiety and confusion. So I think this is the research of the next few months to perhaps years as we work out how best to put choice in front of people. And so I talk about the science of choice here, helping the user to decide, helping the provider to advise, helping the health system to carry choice, and helping countries, of course, to be able to provide choice. So all of this is going to be very important in the next little while. And we do understand it's never just the product, it's the program. And there's a clinical aspect, there's the policy and the program itself, and then there are personal aspects that come into this. And when we think of new products, we really have to think about all of the above. We also have to create demand. And perhaps we haven't been good about doing that in PrEP. So with Fast PrEP, and here I want to give a shout out again to the Fast PrEP team, we really are trying to take this to a new level of saying, how can we create demand in a very, funky way that appeals to young people? And so again, this is a mind map, if you like, of all the things we can do to increase demand. And a shout out to the Fast PrEP team, who I think really are using some innovation, social media being at the heart of all of this, making sure we are having a direct target population. We're providing adherence tips and creating awareness and encouraging engagement. Here we are using a fantastic group of young people, PrEP ambassadors, themselves often PrEP users, who are coming through to empathically help their peers jump on the PrEP user journey. And this is work that I, really give a shout out to Alzette Rousseau, who's leading the Fast PrEP program. This is work she's put into a PhD. It is now published, showing that there are personalities of people who use PrEP. And she's beautifully described the convenient PrEP user who may prefer a courier, for example, the social PrEP user who wants to do it with people, the independent PrEP user who's perhaps just wants to get on with the job, and the discreet PrEP user who's more concerned that it isn't something that others become aware of. And you can find her paper, and it's now actually published, and read more about this. So interestingly, we are now thinking about PrEP as which drug, which personality, and which outlet, and talking about almost 3D PrEP in that way. So this is, I think, the future. We have a lot still to learn. Pregnant and breastfeeding women, other drug-drug interactions, this question of diagnosis and testing, which is really turning out to be quite a conundrum. Who switches, how often, who chooses which modality, where are the remaining gaps, how do we fit this into DSD, how do we skill our healthcare providers, how do we educate our users? It really is about the science of choice. So in the next 15 minutes, and I'm going to try and hurry up now so we do have some time, I'm going to talk about access because I think this is on everybody's mind. So now we have a ring, we have an injectable. Why isn't this down in our clinics already? And I do want to say this is very important. As a group who does a lot of this clinical research, the first fact I want to highlight is that prevention studies are conducted in regions and communities where HIV burden is the highest. So you can see where the Cabaret, studies were run, and where the ring and where the purpose studies are currently being run. A good participatory principle that I really think needs to be out there and on everybody's lips is that the participants, the people, the communities, and the regions that made this research contribution, that held these studies, conducted these studies, gave up people into these studies, should be the first to partake of the fruits of that research. So that is something I think needs to underpin all of our work going forward. This means that we really do need a magical coming together of license filing and regulatory approval in those countries by the originator pharma. Then they need, or whoever's developing that product, IPM, develop the ring. There needs to be recommendation at an agency level, so guidance needs to come along, both at Geneva level, but then also in country. And that may need some implementation science to enhance those guidelines. Then we need an assessment of cost, efficacy, and affordability, so the investment case. We then need a plan for procurement at a national level, and this means political will and financial contribution. So does government put the finance out there and available? And we may require an interim plan for an agency to come in if that finance is not ready in country. And obviously, all alongside, we need other alternatives for affordable options, such as generics. And this is where we have to involve organizations such as the Medicines Patent Pool. At every single one of these levels, we need to come together with our voices for advocacy and activism, because this doesn't just happen miraculously overnight. And here I want to take you back, for those of you who are old enough to remember the 2000s, when we were sitting at a terrible, terrible time, where there were no antiretrovirals in the South, in the global South, and people were dying in droves of AIDS. Things started to change. So the first thing was Brazil was a pathfinder and started to, in a way, make generics in a renegade way, right? So they broke out of the rules about patents and started to make generic antiretrovirals. Countries started to pay for or bring drugs in, put them in their guidance, and we started to see the expansion from the developed world to the developing world. And with that, we saw that amazing return of life expectancy, 21 million lives saved because of antiretroviral access. And the Medicines Patent Pool obviously played a very important role, but also agencies played a very important role. In here, shout out to PEPFAR, to Global Fund, and other agencies that really changed the face of this. But you will remember the advocacy that went into seeing this happen. So what is it about medicine patents? Well, patents provide exclusivity over new medicines for a period of 20 years. They are requested by an inventor, usually a pharma company, and granted by national regional patent offices. So while a patent is in force, generics cannot enter the market, and typically they have a monopoly, and so prices remain high with the originated brand drug. Once the patents expire, the generics can come in, and that's when we start to see the price drop. So this is where we see price coming down. Now, what can we do in the meantime? We can either wait for the patent to expire, and you can see where some of those key drugs, when their patents will expire, or sometimes a patent is not filed in a particular country. So for example, here you see around the world where Cabernet patents have been filed and where they have not been filed. Or finally, an organization such as the Medicines Patent Pool can negotiate that a sub-license is given to a generic company to be able to make generics outside of the patent expiry period. And this is exactly what has now happened with Cabernet. And I'll come back to that in a moment. So let's just talk about access to oral PrEP. This is what we have at the moment, in many cases generic, and you can see that it really has led to quite an increase in the number of PrEP users around the world. We've missed the target, and we seem to still be missing that 10 million person target, but the contributors that have really made a big difference have been South Africa and Kenya. You see the other African countries now stepping in, and you can see why. The generic government price in South Africa at the moment is $4.30 for a bottle of 28 pills. So quite significantly different to these other prices around the world. There has been a coalition of organizations to say, can we speed up how quickly we can get long-acting PrEP to people? So they've got cabotegravir and the dapivirine ring on their radar, and they've brought together all these stakeholders with the secretariat at AVAC to say, can we help to accelerate access around the world? And there is a plan for doing this. You can go to the AVAC website. You can read about what's being done to try and improve the time to access to these long-acting agents. Here's where the DAPI ring so far is licensed, which countries which have given regulatory approval. You can see most of them in East and Southern Africa, very little in Western Africa, which is concerning. And there are some efforts to bring down the cost of goods. First of all, the Global Fund is buying up and trying to get the DAPI ring out. PEPFAR cannot because it is not FDA approved. They have given a licensing agreement to Kayara Health here in South Africa, which hopefully will also bring the price down if they start making it generically. And with the 3-monthly drug, we expect price to come down. Where are we with long-acting injectable? Well, so far, there are 18 countries that have marketing authorization. 7 of them are African. 80% of them are in low and middle income countries. We have WHO guidance, and there are a number of implementation science projects underway to try and inform guidelines. There are PEPFAR procurement plans and COP agreements in 6 countries, and you can see the Global Fund is also looking into providing that sort of aid to get things moving. Here you see the regulatory status for CAB-LA around the world. So we are moving in the right direction. Obviously, the originator has to make enough product. And you can see in 2023, that was dismally low, but things have really looked up in 2024, and they are going to be further escalated in 2025. Our problem is the price. So you see the public price there, $180 compared to, a much lower per annum price for generic oral FTDF. So the big question is, are African governments going to be able to afford this in order to start their own procurement? So we do have to find other ways to bring the price down. These sub-licenses have, via the MPP, been granted to Aurobindo, Cipla, and Viatris, all of them in India. But there is a hope that at least one of them is going to try and make manufacturing in Africa, in South Africa. The tech support and the know-how agreements have all been signed, but unfortunately, the timeline is such that we probably won't see generics until 2027. There is a need for bioequivalence testing. It takes a long time with a long-acting injectable, so 2027 is the sort of optimistic timeline for generics. What's happening in terms of implementation science? These are all the places in Eastern and Southern Africa where IS studies are ongoing with the ring or with CAB-LA. There are probably about 10 of them in the sort of Eastern Southern region. And the questions on the table are around acceptability, feasibility, preference, differentiated delivery models, counseling that ensures choice, teaching healthcare providers, including lay and peer counselors, best practices for HIV testing and safety monitoring, what the market segmentation looks like, what the impact on persistence will be, the seasons of choice, safety at scale, thinking about comorbidities, and of course, bringing communities along as we go. You can see there's a very nice broad group of populations who are being involved, but nobody in terms of people who use and inject drugs or the incarcerated. You can look and see and compare if you go to the AVAC website where we are with CAB-LA and with dapivirine vaginal ring. It's very nicely summarized there. And you can look at it in terms, well, this is the regulatory, and you can look at it per country. So you can go and have a look at your country and see where you fit into that access plan. Just to say, it's not only PrEP that we're waiting for, we're also waiting for the treatment, the cabotegravir rilpivirine bilateral injection for treatment. And I'm giving a shout out here to young people. The Zambian Youth Declaration is available on this website. You can go there and sign, as young people around the world are asking for these long-acting agents, which appear to have hit a bottleneck, and they need our support. So in summary, and I'm sorry it's taken a little bit long, it's a lot of information, but I would say to you that primary prevention that is taken to scale comprehensively, respectfully, and equitably wherever it's needed is key to epidemic control. Effective primary prevention is most effective when it suits the user and comes with options for choosing. We will only see epidemic impact when prevention is scaled boldly. Scaling depends on access that is unrestricted and inclusive, but we need R&D still to continue since current options have limitations. I've hinted at some of the diagnostic issues. I've hinted at some of the persistence issues. Choice matters and lifestyles are varied. Since long-acting biomedicals are more complex, they may cost more to make. And so we need new and innovative costing, funding, and incentivization to ensure that R&D continues and that these products get to all those who need them. And alongside a bunch of people to thank for contributions over many years, I do want to pay special tribute to all the activists that have helped to increase access to medicines by lifting their voices and even placing their bodies on the line. And I'll stop there. I'm afraid I can't turn on my video, but I'll stop sharing. And if we do have a few minutes, I'll answer any burning questions. Back to you, Nadine.
Yes, thank you so much, Prof. Bekker, for the very comprehensive talk and the fantastic overview of what's available, where we're going, what's needed, and reminding us of the importance of advocacy and access. I will open up the floor for questions. If you can raise your hand, I see there's one up already. I will unmute you then, and you can go ahead and ask your question, or you can put your question in the chat, and then I'll monitor that as well.
Is somebody asking a question, Nadine, or are you struggling?
Not yet.
Okay. So
here we go. Someone raised
were...
a hand. No, sorry.
Okay.
There we go.
So Devora, I'll fill in just to say that Devora rightly pointed out that Cabernet has been approved for pregnancy in South Africa. So although we have data coming in to support from 084 and the implementation science project, South Africa has actually had quite a lenient approval, and they've agreed that pregnancy is okay. That is not the case for the Dipivirine ring. So we don't yet have South African approval for pregnancy and the Dipivirine ring.
Okay, I see, Portia, you have a question. You should be able to unmute yourself and you can ask your question. You can go ahead.
I'm still not hearing Portia.
Yeah, no, I think she is unmuted. Let's see, I think Devora wanted to... they had raised her hand as well. So let's see. I'll just mute Portia for now. Devora, did you want to add something?
Thank you, LGB, for an amazing tour de force and presentation. I was kind of comment, just like LGB did, just because CAB is available for pregnant and breastfeeding women in South Africa and in other countries like Botswana as well. And the Dipivirine ring has been shown to be safe in pregnancy in ongoing clinical trials. So we're hopeful that that will also become available for pregnant and lactating people next year. And then somebody else mentioned, Kath mentioned that lenacapavir is also being trialed in pregnant women. So we shouldn't have to wait, which I agree 100%. Thank you.
Yeah, to be quite precise, the Purpose 1 study has included women. They are allowed to get pregnant and continue to receive lenacapavir with a separate consent form. So almost the thing that is happening now in the open label phase of 084 is happening during the randomized phase of lenacapavir. So a shout out to Purpose, to maybe the Gilead team, that they have learnt perhaps from other clinical trials to both include adolescents and pregnant and lactating people in the actual phase 3 study, which I think is very exciting. And then in the Purpose 2, they really have tried to be as LGBTQI inclusive as possible. So as you saw, a really very broad group of people who have sex with other men included in Purpose 2. Okay, I'm seeing any ADEs. So that is adverse events, I'm presuming. Thanks, Portia, for that question. So yes, I didn't cover perhaps some of the main sort of drawbacks of the long-acting injectables is injection site reactions. So in the Cabernet appears to be incredibly side effect free, but we do see injection site reactions, mostly pain, but it does seem that most people tolerate that very, very well. And there are ways that we can reduce the pain. In terms of the treatment, it seems rilpivirine is slightly more painful than cabotegravir. It's obviously 2 injections there instead of just the 1. They are quite large volume injections. So it is it is important that people, when they're making their choice, they need to be okay with needles and they need to be okay with a somewhat painful injection. But it's only every 8 weeks, so that's great. Lenacapavir, there have been reported nodules. So the injection is given subcut. It does need to be given with quite a good technique. There is an idea that maybe down the road people will be able to self-administer the lenacapavir. Obviously can't do the cabotegravir because that goes into your buttock. Although again there it has been given into the thigh. And we saw some evidence for that at CROI. The lenacapavir is subcut, and so there is a notion that down the pike, maybe people will be able to give it in a self-administered way. Certainly in Purpose 1 and Purpose 2, providers are giving it. If the injection technique is a little bit off, there does seem to be the formation of a nodule, and the nodule is a reaction to the lenacapavir to an extent. It's sort of the depot, if you like, from which the lenacapavir diffuses over time. It does disappear in most people, but there have been 1 or 2 people where the nodules have been quite long-standing. Remember, the injection is only given twice a year, so definitely a lot easier in that regard. And again, a low side effect problem. Important to note that cabotegravir does have a drug-drug interaction with TB drugs. So that is a drawback, and quite a significant one, obviously, in our part of the world. And I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything else. Obviously, cabotegravir, you remove hepatitis B treatment. So with oral PrEP, you get the bonus of getting hepatitis B treatment. If somebody goes on to Cabernet and they do have hepatitis B, that treatment stops, as it were. So it is quite important to note whether people are co-infected with hepatitis B, and if so, there is also some anxiety about the possibility of a transaminitis with CAB. So we do watch that, but we are seeing very low evidence of that in both the phase 3 and now in the phase 3B. So generally very easy to take. Same with the FTDF and FTAF, all relatively easy to take. in that regard. Dapivirine, very, very low side effect profile. Very little systemic absorption. Most of its magic is at the vaginal mucosa. And so really very low side effect profile with the vaginal ring. And maybe that's its best characteristic, actually. I think our time is up, Nadine.
Yes, that's right. It's just gone 3 o'clock, and I can see some participants have dropped off the call, which I can respect because we had an hour schedule. Yeah, so I think we can end it here. Thank you again for your presentation. And yeah, we'll see everyone who'd like to at our next research output meeting. Thanks again.
Thanks, everyone. Go well.